Euphoria is mirroring, or was mirroring, the nihilism of a generation that has been growing up within the times of the likes of Andrew Tate and Bonnie Blue. It's obvious. I'm sure we've all seen the clips and have been thinking, what the And even me, I had to do my digging because what is going on? I believe in trying to create moments that are designed for us to talk about online, like I'm doing now. And there's been OnlyFans stories, sugar daddies and babies, mummification fetishes, and more. But I think it's the sheer amount that makes you think, who is this even for? And why does it seem like it's been laced with misogyny throughout? So let's talk about it. Hi everyone, I'm Sweeney the journalist. I hope you enjoyed this video and let's just get into it. Let's get one thing straight. Euphoria has never been easy to watch. When HBO's Euphoria premiered in 2019, critics were both excited, entranced, and horrified. Some praised the creator, Sam Levinson, for his new take on high school drama genre, which included gritty portrayals of drug addiction, and other people questioned whether it was really necessary to hire 20-something-year-olds actresses to play 16-year-olds, and repeatedly show their bare bodies on screen, which is not a legal creative choice per se, but certainly a questionable one. And it was a show about teenagers that refuse to shy away from the confusing and often terrifying realities of growing up in the modern world. Sam Levinson held up a mirror that cranked up the volume. But how does the series go from having an 80% rating on Rotten Tomatoes to just 43%? And in the third season, the show picks up its story 5 years after the characters have graduated from high school, and it definitely feels a bit lost outside of the whole high school setting, where there is a wave of exploring different genres and plots, which I believe are glamorizing misogyny and violence. But in this, Sam Levinson, who created the failed show The Idol, I'll discuss that later on, has captured and sort of capitalized a new generation of actors into the A-list to the point where it seems now like they have outgrown the show. Zendaya, Sweeney, and Jacob Elordi, to name a few. And I'm not going to go in depth on each episode because you can just watch it yourself. But I do want to bring it to the main point, as I said earlier, regarding the glamorization of violence and misogyny that Levinson and the show does quite poorly. It's very interesting because quite early on, all female characters have decided to pursue lines of work that revolve around male pleasure or servitude. Cassie, played by Sweeney, begs her husband Nate to let her do OnlyFans. Jules drops out of art school to become a sugar baby who fulfills the fetishes of married men. And Rue starts working for a ruthless strip club owner as a drug mule. And it's almost as if Levinson created a show that took, I believe, strong-headed women and turned them into shallow, selfish, and manosphere inflicted, where these women now only engage with men to use them for money. And even when people could feel empowered, like Kitty, a dancer at the strip club, she ends up being assaulted by a group of clients in a private room. It's as if Levinson literally can't conceive of a woman doing any other job. And sure, if one character went that route after high school, they'd be room for plausible deniability. But all of them? I swear, it's like he doesn't know that we are, as women, allowed to do other stuff, right? Like, do you know that, Sam? Do you? It's an especially glaring writing choice, considering that last season one of the show's stars, Barbie Ferrer, quit the series after Levinson sidelined her plot by turning her high school-aged character into an online dominatrix. And so we see a shift that starts with Cassie, from teen drama to misogynistic spectacle. So Cassie launches her OnlyFans and goes to great lengths to fulfill the fetishes of her customers. Being frustrated by her fiancé Nate's refusal to spend $50,000 on her dream wedding floral arrangement, she proposes a solution that feels both crazy and disturbingly doable within the logic of the show.
I want to sell your body for floral arrangements.
I will if I have to. I didn't wait my entire life to have a ghetto wedding.
And even though this is controversial, it's not really shocking. Her trajectory has always been defined by a lack of control over how she is perceived and desired, and the way she tries to gain back control. Nate, her husband, who was once highly possessive over her and determined to provide for her, slowly starts to see her as a cash cow to clear his debts. And he starts to even encourage her to film an erotic video just so she can send him more money. And so the relationship is reduced to being transactional. It's interesting because in Louis Theroux' recent Netflix documentary, Inside the Manosphere, many of the people he interviewed were male-focused and highly misogynistic. They viewed women as manipulative creatures who, in their mind, only interact with men in order to extract their most valuable resources, clout and cash. And this framing runs through Euphoria, where Cassie, a character who was once motivated by love, so much so that she risked everything to steal Nate from her best friend, now seems totally obsessed with money and material things. Louis Staples writes that Euphoria's choice to zone in on how algorithms are stripping us of our humanity is distinctly meta, not least because Levinson has been known for using shock tactics to draw attention to his work. It also feels fitting that Sweeney is right at the centre of the show. If you don't know, in 2025, the actor's American Eagle ad campaign caused political controversy, with people accusing her of using whiteness to sell jeans. Donald Trump himself, alongside the far-right wingers, supported her, and American Eagle's stocks rose. And since then, the star has capitalised on this by launching her own underwear brand, Sweeney, which her character Cassie wore on Euphoria while cosplaying as a dog. Literally. Even though this is commodification in itself, there is discomfort which points to a deeper tension in how we as an audience are to interpret women characters who participate in their own commodification. This has been intensified by Euphoria's cultural positioning in society. The series has held a reputation for its depictions of addiction and teenage access, as well as its behind-the-scenes controversy. And within each new series, there's always been questions about exploitation, indulgence, and the blurred line between critique and spectacle. Levinson isn't new to this, however. He faced similar scrutiny with The Idol, a project that was highly criticised for its chaotic production and for what many people saw and described as exploitative torture depictions of female sexuality. And this led to the spark of concerns about his personal approach to female representation. What is questionable is Levinson's single authorship on Euphoria. He and the show were operating largely without any traditional writer's room, therefore leading to Euphoria reflecting a highly centralised and sensationalised creative vision. In this, it risks the limitation of a complex narrative and instead reinforcing a singular male gaze that can shift into misogyny. Tracy Lemire, a publicist, said in an interview with Newsweek, "It is misogyny, but it's also marketing. From their marketing perspective, it doesn't matter if the audience is comfortable. They only care if the audience is talking. Whether they're thrilled or enraged, is it a hashtag? Whether we like the content or not, it's that engagement, that audience reaction that matters. It keeps the show relevant." Shows understand that if they want to go viral, they don't want to have everybody happy with them. Many critics of Levinson point to the direction that his shows continue to convey its female characters into narratives of degradation and exploitation. And I can see why, because when you watch it, it's hard not to question whether Euphoria offers any vision of women beyond sex work, sexualization, or victimhood. Levinson is creating a mirror of society today. And this is a day and age where problematic sexual content is increasingly normalized and the female body is portrayed as sexually available for male desire. A shift made possible by the rise of the internet. And as most artists and critics do, Levinson defends his work, using the argument that of the hypersexualized nature of contemporary culture, pornography and digital media deeply shape how young people understand intimacy. But the show isn't critiquing it in any way or making any deep point with it. It instead reflects and revels in this issue, which is a massive problem, by the way. This tension and critique becomes more complicated when in the broader context of contemporary sex work. Public attitudes towards strippers, escorts, and sex workers differ significantly from attitudes towards OnlyFans creators, which also include those who appear economically and socially privileged. Cassie's storyline echoes a polarized discourse which has only grown around women who engage in digital type of work, which is becoming increasingly normalized, but also a condemned occupation, framed as empowering in some contexts and self-degrading in others. And despite OnlyFans becoming popular, this platform can be predatory because they like to promote liberation, but simultaneously downplay all the risks associated with it. And there is so much research that highlights significant structural inequalities for the women performing on these platforms. Investigations have uncovered cases of abuse, coercion, and even material slipping through moderation systems. Many think that you can be millionaires, but only a tiny percentage of creators earn substantial incomes, while the average user makes relatively little, often pushing them towards more extreme content to remain competitive. Lauren King writes that the illusion of autonomy exists within a system shaped by demand, algorithmic visibility, and escalating expectations of explicitness. This normalization of sexual commodification has shaped expectations beyond the platform itself. Social media and ecosystems continue to blur the line between mainstream content and adult material. And so you have young people who are highly exposed to this type of imagery that is often framed as aspirational. There has been an increase in teenage girls who see this type of content creation as a viable and solid career path. Not even for women, but young boys have started to have similar unrealistic expectations of them, their bodies, and behavior. And so coming back to the show, Cassie's decision to start an OnlyFans account, which is to fund her unrealistic wedding, is glorified. And so there's discomfort from how we know many people who don't have to do this type of work do it to fulfill an unrealistic election and afford an expensive lifestyle. And I say have because this type of work, especially outside the Western world, is shaped by intersecting pressures of class, race, and economics. Not all women who enter this work do so under the same conditions, and not all are judged the same way for doing so. Cassie occupies a position shaped by privilege, visibility, and the logic of aestheticized consumption. Because she's not perceived as needing to commodify herself for survival or opportunity, she represents a form of choice feminism that frames any individual decision as inherently empowering, even when those choices reproduce long-standing gender norms. And in this case, women continue to market their bodies. Men remain the primary consumers, and the marketplace rewards hyper-feminine conformity. This distinction helps explain the intensity of the audience's reaction to her actions. Research on women in India, for example, shows that many enter sex work as a constrained sex choice, shaped by poverty, lack of education, domestic abuse, and limited employment options. For these women, it is often a last resort, a means of survival rather than self-expression. On the other hand, it appears that digital workers most often cite reasons like flexibility, autonomy, and the appeal of quick and easy financial gain as a motivation. This reveals a broader contradiction. Society tends to be more accepting of sex workers when their participation is framed as a response to economic necessity, rather than as a voluntary or personally motivated choice. And in other words, sex work is often viewed as legitimate when it is understood as a means of survival, while women who engage in it by choice are more likely to face criticism, scrutiny, or moral judgment. I don't even want to say that the show is commenting because it's not, okay? It's not. But it's almost trying to show the length people will do for the money and fame. The Idol with Lily Rose Depp and The Weeknd replicated something very sinister. The show, also by Sam Levinson and HBO, was about the excess of fame, the absurdity of celebrity worship, and the recordings industry's shameless objectification of underage talent. The show lays bare the misogyny and exploitation that was lurking in Euphoria throughout season 1 and 2. The abuse Jocelyn, played by Depp, endures at the hands of Tedros, whether it's under the guise of consensual or not, is wicked manipulation, and so blatantly hateful towards her that it calls into question the intentions behind Euphoria. There are continuous acts of humiliation, and even when the show tries to understand the pressure that she's under to produce another hit. And to be clear, Euphoria has been a show where its women characters have been objectified and pitted against each other. When it was in high school, in the previous seasons, this could easily resemble Mean Girls, 30 Reasons Why, and Gossip Girl, for instance. But for the first 2 seasons, these women were more in control of their own destiny. But now in the real world, where they're tasked with making their own money, and so the misogyny that they are subjected to changes and worsens. And so the show failed in exploring the nuances of female subjugation in an interesting way. It comes across as a manosphere-tainted world of how young women behave and are glamorized with gorgeous costumes. Louis Theroux says in an interview, "A big part of their message is that life is a video game and you need to win the game by scoring high in various metrics. How many people you sleep with, how much money you have, how big your muscles are, and how big your private parts are. And if life is the ultimate game, then they're pretending or alleging that they can teach you how to win it." Euphoria offers a feminized version of this. Throughout the history of America, there have been windows of time where anyone could get rich, narrates Rue. The gold rush, reputation, cryptocurrency, it's all about timing. And Jules had found her window of opportunity. Unfortunately, this opportunity turned out to be getting wined and dined by wealthy men who use her as an object. Emily Toppin wrote, "I initially found myself wondering what woman hurt Sam Levinson badly enough to make him write female characters like this. Then I realized that by asking the question, I was instinctively searching for a woman to blame for a man's own behaviour, which is also the central ethos of this entire season. Euphoria really would have benefited from even one woman in the writer's room. And when I did my research, it's possible that the show's first season was so popular because Levinson absorbed a woman's artistic perspective through osmosis. Artist Petra Collins, known for her trademark photography of adolescent femininity, claimed she was recruited by Levinson to develop the project alongside him. She reportedly did so for months, helping to develop the series' distinct visual style, only to be abruptly pushed out before filming began. In an interview, she said, "I moved to LA and worked for HBO for about 5 months. I was like, I am directing the show, I created a whole world for it, did the casting, whatever. And at the last minute, HBO was like, we're not hiring you because you were too young." A year later, I walked out of my apartment and saw this billboard for Euphoria. I started crying, I was so shocked. I mean, it happens to me so many times in my career, but not on a scale like that. Sam Levinson and the limits of his vision. Much like Euphoria's power comes from the creator, Sam Levinson, drawing on his own history of addiction. The show's depiction of relapse, self-destruction, shame, and compulsive behaviour often feel emotionally convincing because they emerge from lived experience. Rue's struggle in particular carry the intimacy of personal memory rather than detached observation. However, the same autobiographical impulse that gives Euphoria its authenticity may also expose its limitations. Levinson's perspective is shaped not only by addiction but also by privilege. As the son of Barry Levinson, he entered the entertainment industry with access and opportunities unavailable to most aspiring creators. This background does not invalidate his experience, but it does influence how he understands suffering, recovery, and social reality. The show's world often feels insulated from material concerns such as economic precarity, housing insecurity, underfunded schools, or the broader structural conditions that shape addiction for many people. And as a result, addiction in the show frequently becomes individualized and aestheticized. The focus remains on psychological turmoil, emotional intensity, and visual spectacle rather than the social systems that produce and exacerbate addiction. Levinson is exceptionally skilled at portraying what addiction feels like from the inside, but less attentive to the wider political and economic realities surrounding it. Euphoria's over-reliance on degrading work as a trope could be forgiven if Levinson actually had something interesting to say, but he doesn't. He could have explored why do women from different backgrounds go into this type of industry? What is the meaningful difference between the girls working at Alamano's club and Cassie posing in front of a ring light in her bedroom? Instead, the show focuses on brutalizing his characters just for the sake of it. It seems as if the show has grown into little more than an obligation all its actors are contractually trapped inside. Half the cast has exploded into movie stardom and many of them seem barely emotionally present anymore. 2 cast members have tragically died since Euphoria first premiered, including Angus Cloud from a 2023 overdose. His death occurred before filming began, after which Levinson made the bizarre and possibly offensive choice to write Fez as still being alive, only off-screen in prison. But this poor writing hasn't come out of nowhere. The same was said for The Idol, which was for some people traumatic, looking at how Rose Depp has been exploited in trying to reach her goals as a singer. I actually just found out that Sydney Sweeney had to ask if some of her characters' topless scenes were even necessary. Like, be for real. We need to ask why these clarifications were even necessary and what this says about Levinson's approach to portraying the complexity of women's lives. It seems as though Levinson deems it worth exploring if the woman in question meets the requisite bar of sex appeal. And in the Idol's case, if the women navigate their trauma through these interactions. Unfortunately, the empowerment of women is interlinked with explicitness. And while this may be true in many instances, it's not true in situations where men mediate this empowerment of what they think it is. When there is continuous attempt to bombard the audience with provocative scenes, Levinson has shown us the perfect example of why men creating sexually empowered female characters is a lesson in fertility. In an article called "Should the Awfulness of the Idol Change How We Look Back at Euphoria?", the author writes, "This isn't the work of a genius. Levinson is simply a grown-up Nepo baby held as a genius for creating TikTok-worthy aesthetic visuals, being given an obscene budget and an international platform to depict his voyeurism kink." And I want to be clear, it's not that there isn't any value in depicting female sexuality itself, but when it comes to Levinson, nothing is gained. His treatment of women's bodies doesn't deeply or even critique our understanding of the myriad ways society incentivizes hypersexualization. It simply feels like an excuse to enact male fantasies, flattening women into objects without an ounce of nuance. Exploitation as a way of life. Euphoria is a world where everyone is beautiful, but also awful at the same time, and is an aesthetically maximalistic vision of America and further the Western world that has been corrupted by capitalism, turning it into a rageful, lonely society. Despite everyone trying to attain this American dream, they're all unhappy. They feel like losers and they're living in and out by margins. There's actually a book of essays called Trick Mirror by Gia Tolentino, where she argues that scamming is becoming central to American life. And the book explores the river of self-delusion that surges just beneath the surface of our lives, and is a book about the incentives that shape us and about how hard it is to see ourselves clearly in a culture that revolves around the self. Tolentino writes that to be American is to learn that one of the best bids a person can make for financial safety is to get really good at exploiting other people. And these dynamics are full throughout the show. And it's not just America, even though they are the biggest. The world operates on this thesis. Exploitation in the West seems to have become a way of life. You may ask who is exploited, but I ask who isn't. 80% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck, and 70% can't raise $1,000 for an emergency, and abuse is rife in the industry. Exploitation is no longer the exception in the West, but the rule. And the show almost seems like exploitation is warning a generation that has been raised not to expect anything from anyone. Rue, Black womanhood, and the politics of looking. And even when it comes to Rue, throughout Euphoria, the camera often functions as more than a passive observer. It becomes an active participant in the power dynamics it depicts. Its voyeuristic lens invites audiences into moments of intimacy, vulnerability, and violence, forcing viewers to confront how Black womanhood is made visible under the systems that seek to control, scrutinize, and consume it. Rather than simply aestheticized trauma, these visual choices can be read as exposing the mechanisms through which Black women are rendered vulnerable within a white patriarchal social order. The camera's lingering attention on moments of emotional breakdown, body exposure, and psychological distress reflects a broader cultural history in which Black women have been denied privacy, protection, and full humanity. Under the white patriarchal gaze, Black femininity is often positioned as simultaneously hyper-visible and invisible, constantly watched yet rarely understood on its own terms. And Euphoria exploits this tension by placing viewers uncomfortably close to its characters' suffering, refusing the distance that might make such experience easier to consume. And so discomfort generated by the show's visual language is not a flaw, but a political intervention. The audience becomes implicated in the act of looking, forced to recognize how spectatorship itself can reproduce structures of domination. Trauma is not presented merely as an individual experience, but as an evidence of larger systems that shape whose pain is normalized, ignored, or fetishized. By exposing the fragility imposed upon Black womanhood under the white patriarchal eye, the series transforms personal suffering into a broader critique of the social conditions that make such suffering possible. Are we getting it? Do we understand? I hope you understand. If not, just rewind some of this. Great. This is what Euphoria will be remembered for. Not the groundbreaking plots of earlier seasons or the star-making power that turned the cast into household names. It won't be remembered for the show's fashion and beauty looks. It has become defined by controversy on and off the screen, from misogyny accusations leveled at Levinson to rumours about behind-the-scenes fallouts between cast members. And ultimately, the problem with Euphoria isn't that it depicts misogyny, exploitation, addiction, or violence. Art should be allowed to explore uncomfortable realities. The problem is that the show increasingly struggles to distinguish between critiquing those systems and indulging in them. What began as a messy but compelling portrait of a generation shaped by loneliness, social media, and self-destruction has evolved into something far more cynical. A world where nearly every relationship is transactional, every woman is commodified, and every act of degradation is framed as profound social commentary. In many ways, Euphoria reflects a culture that produced it. A culture obsessed with virality, visibility, and turning every aspect of human experience into content. But reflection alone is not enough. A mirror can show us who we are, but it cannot explain why we become this way. And that's where Euphoria ultimately falls short. The issue isn't a lack of morality, but an absence of humanity, and the male gaze with a multi-million-dollar budget. At times like this, accuracy is needed. It's imperative that we're accurate. But fortunately, accurate is the result of good intentions alone. It comes from paying people with lived experience for expertise. And so I can't really get behind the whole, oh, this is so needed, because it isn't. It really isn't. The sheer amount of what we were bombarded with is crazy, and I think it glamorizes violence and misogyny to a tea. And so as I'm at the end of my video, I want your comments. What do you actually think about Euphoria if you watched it? If you didn't watch it and you happen to come across this video, thanks for watching. What are your thoughts on just the way that violence and misogyny is glamorized in our media now? What do you think should be done? Please write your comments below. Please do like and subscribe as well. I'm on my way to 2K. We're working there, and every little does help. I also have a Substack where I write about pop culture and politics, so if you want to hear more from me, please do head over to Substack and subscribe to my work at Stream the Journalist, because I do write more often on that. If you were interested in this video, you may also like one of my recent videos where I speak about the return of the girl boss and the rise of black women in the trad wife trend that's been going on. But yes guys, thank you for watching. I'm Sweeney the Journalist, and see you guys again very soon.